Okay, in this video we're going to talk about lipids, another class of biomolecules. So lipids, like the carbohydrates, contain a lot of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but a lot less than in carbohydrates, and sometimes they also contain phosphorus. Now lipids are insoluble in water, typically because they're nonpolar hydrophobic, and there are four major types of lipids. We got the triglycerides, phospholipids, steroids, and eicosanoids. Now the triglycerides we call neutral fats. They're fats when they're a solid, but we call them oils when they're in their liquid state. And triglycerides are made of three fatty acid chains bound to a glycerol backbone. Triglycerides' main functions are involved with energy storage, insulation, and protection for our bodies. Now the triglycerides can be constructed of either saturated fatty acids or unsaturated fatty acids. Now, all carbon chains are linked via single covalent bonds in these lipid chains, and it results in a molecule with a maximum number of hydrogen atoms. We therefore say it's saturated. Now, saturated fatty acids, because they have more of a straight molecular shape, they're more likely to have intramolecular forces that allow these fatty acids to stick together. So what you find is that saturated fats, fatty acids, are more solid at room temperature because they're effectively more strongly bound to each other instead of being loose. So what we find is that you find a lot of saturated fatty acids in things like animal fats, butter, or hydrogenated plant oils, where basically food scientists can effectively convert unsaturated fats to saturated fats by just adding more hydrogen atoms to an unsaturated fatty acid. The unsaturated fatty acids are where you have one or more carbon atoms that are linked via double bonds, and this actually results in a fewer number of hydrogen atoms, right? Because if you have double bonds, carbon can only form 4 bonds. If there's carbon-carbon double bonds, that means there's less available bonds for hydrogen atoms, so we say that it's therefore unsaturated. What you find is that the unsaturated fatty acids are more liquid at room temperature. An example of this would be things like plant oils, like olive oil. And when you think of trans fats, these are actually modified. They're more unhealthy. But the omega-3 fatty acids are heart healthy because they're less likely to deposit within your arteries and form plaques that can contribute to cardiovascular disease. So what we see here then is the general structure of a triglyceride. Remember, tri meaning 3, glycerol backbone, so triglyceride. So here's the glycerol backbone, and we have 3 different fatty acid chains. Together they form the triglyceride, which is the neutral fat. And when you make a triglyceride, it's also a dehydration synthesis, so it yields a little bit of water as well. Now, phospholipids are modified triglycerides. So it's glycerol with 2 fatty acids plus a phosphate-containing group. So you have a head or tail regions that have different properties. Typically, the head of a phospholipid is more polar and therefore attracted to water. The tails are nonpolar and repelled by water. And this is because the polar head groups can participate in hydrogen bonding and therefore attract water. The tails are nonpolar. They can't participate in hydrogen bonding and are therefore repelled by water. Now what's interesting is that these phospholipids play an important role in cell membrane structure. So in chapter 3 we'll talk about the structure of the plasma membrane, which is actually a phospholipid bilayer. So you have 2 layers of these types of lipids, or phospholipids. So just looking at the general structure of a phospholipid, we have the phosphorus-containing polar head group. This is more attracted to water because it can participate in hydrogen bonding. We get the glycerol backbone and then 2 fatty acid tails here. Now, this one that's more straight is the saturated fatty acid tail. Remember, these are the ones that are more likely to form fats at room temperature. And this one that's bent is actually the unsaturated fatty acid variety, and the reason why it's bent is it has this carbon-carbon double bond here, and the reason why it's unsaturated is that because of the fact there's a double bond here, it's not totally saturated with its maximal number of hydrogen atoms, so that's what gives it its bent appearance. Now the fact that this is bent also allows it to be more liquid at room temperature, so you find that these unsaturated fats are the ones that are more likely to form oils. Now, steroids consist of 4 interlocking ring structures. They're more complex, but some common steroids include cholesterol, vitamin D, steroid hormones, and bile salts. The most important steroid is cholesterol, because ultimately cholesterol is the building block of vitamin D, steroid hormones, and bile salts. Steroids are also very important for plasma membrane structure because they actually help stabilize the plasma membrane of your cells under varying temperature extremes. Now this is just showing the general structure of a steroid. Remember, we have 4 interlocking rings here and a little bit of a chain on the side. And this is just an example of cholesterol. So the cholesterol is important because it forms the basis for all steroids formed within your body. Now you don't need dietary cholesterol. However, it's important to have some cholesterol in your diet in order for steroid synthesis. However, this is a non-essential type of molecule because your body, especially your liver, can synthesize its own cholesterol from other biomolecules. Now, the eicosanoids are the 4th major class of lipids, and there's many different ones. They're derived from fatty acids, particularly arachidonic acid, and this is found in cell membranes. Its most important eicosanoids are the prostaglandins. These play a role in things like blood clotting, blood pressure, inflammation, and even labor contractions. And so when you think of the prostaglandins and eicosanoids, these are actually types of signaling molecules that are important in these types of mechanisms in our body. So blood clotting, blood pressure, inflammation, and even labor contraction.